It's time now for perspective. We often use indicators like GDP or the percentage of a population living below the poverty line as a lens through which to assess a country's wealth or poverty. But what does it really mean to live at the poverty level when it comes to the smells and flavours of daily life? My guests today are photographer-economist duo Chow and Lin, whose exhibition Summer of Fireflies, the Poverty Line solo exhibition, will be shown at the Rencontres d'Arles photography exhibition from the 4th of July in the city of Arles. They've also just published a book, The Poverty Line, that traces the 10 years they spent examining the intimate relationship between economics, culture and food. Thank you so much for speaking to us here on France 24 today. Firstly, how did this project come to life and how did you realise this was something that you could both work on?
Hi. I think it really came about when I was traveling and living in New York. And within the same week, I found myself in Kolkata in India. And what you see in New York is there is glitz, there is glamour, but at the same time, there are also homeless people living on the streets, in the subways. And when I went to Kolkata in India, there were far more poor than the rest of the population in the city itself. It led me to question, what does it mean to be poor? Is it better to be a poor person in New York or Calcutta? And that's a very difficult question to answer. And so we set out to try to find some ways to answer that question ourselves.
And your book is entitled The Poverty Line. What exactly is the poverty line? Because it's a relative concept, isn't it, depending on which country we're talking about?
Yes, so poverty is defined in different ways in different countries. A lot of developing countries use an absolute poverty line, and a lot of developing countries use the absolute poverty line, while a lot of developed countries use a relative poverty line. What we have done is that we've sought to understand each country's own perspective or how they define poverty, and we translate that into a per person per day rate, and we calculate the food budget, which would be available to a person living at the poverty line of a country. And we go out and buy items from the local food markets, supermarkets, defined by that, and we take photos of that amount of food.
The photos look quite simple. Essentially, what you see is newspapers with food piled on top, and then a photograph is taken from the top. But we have done that across 6 continents, covering 36 countries and territories.
And I wanted to ask you about that aesthetic uniformity. As you said, these photos are taken in many different places across the course of a decade. Why was it important for you to give all of these photos a similar look and feel?
I think when we first started, I think what we really wanted to discover the question is that exactly how much food is available for someone who is poor. And so we wanted to do it in a way that is understandable not just to us, but also to the viewer. And as we went to different countries, we realized that you have different produce in different countries, but a lot of foods are also similar, from eggs to apples to meat and so on. So I find that one of the ways to allow us to compare between different countries is to photograph them in a very consistent manner. So when you place the pictures side by side, you actually have a more objective comparative study to look at those works.
And you mentioned the similarities between different food groups found in different countries. Did you find that there were any stark differences in the quality of food that people were able to access when they live on the poverty line in different countries?
Yes, I think we did see many differences and similarities across different countries, but we also made a conscious decision not to do that kind of comparison ourselves and really let the whole work speak for itself. What we also did was that we assembled a food basket. So basically we cover different food groups across each country, and for each country we'll take 60 to 100 items covering carbohydrates, proteins, fruits and vegetables, snacks and so on. So really, we let the audience look at the work and do their own comparison and also do their own analysis and internal assimilation of understanding the issue.
For example, something like a banana is actually quite universal. You can almost find bananas in almost every corner around the world. But in France, the baguette is actually a staple. It's a staple bread. But over here in Asia, the same baguette would only be sold in a French bakery. And so that would actually be elevated not as a local food, but actually as a foreign food. So when we did the poverty line in Asia, for example, the baguette is not in our basket of goods because that food is just seen as more expensive, but essential and a necessity back in front itself.
And this really is a truly hybrid project. It's not just a series of photographs. There's a lot of hard economic data analysis, graphs to really get your teeth into in your work as well. Why did you make that decision? And were you confident that people would accept this quite innovative format?
Well, our own partnership is a partnership of people coming from different backgrounds. I myself I'm trained in economics and also work as a public servant, drafting public policy. And I think for us, working on art projects has allowed us to cross different disciplines, be able to communicate issues in a very visual way that really addresses complex issues in ways that touch people to want to understand more. So that's how we wanted to marry the different disciplines and use art as a medium of communication and opening up the conversation.
Just a few days ago, the UN announced that global food prices have jumped at their fastest monthly rate in over a decade. And according to the UN's food price index, prices were almost 40% higher this month, or May, I should say, than the same month last year. How worried should we be? Are we heralding a new era of food insecurity post-COVID?
I think the COVID situation has definitely disrupted a lot of lives, a lot of families, and food supply chains. We do see that given the COVID situation, and we are still in the midst of the pandemic, 1 year on or 1.5 years on later, the situation has become more dire, but it has also brought to light a lot of the issues that are already inherently in the economic and social structures, the market structures that we all live by. And this certainly is not going to go away. So I think definitely it is a timely matter that we do need to talk about, and we do need to build up certain resilience towards in our systems to address this. And food insecurity, food accessibility, inequality, these are all issues which have become even more important given a crisis like the COVID situation.
And throughout your book, you're very you make efforts to talk about developed countries as well as developing countries, always underlining the percentage of people living under that country's poverty line in each country. In developed countries, France, the UK, that's often well above 10%. Is that something that you want people to be surprised by? Do you think they will be surprised when they learn that with your book?
I think one of the perceptions about being poor is often associated with homelessness. When we talk to friends, when we talk to people who know we are doing this project, their perception of what poor seems very visible. It's someone whom you see is homeless, who doesn't have a job, who may not even have an education. But what we realize in our own research and in the work that we've done over the past 10 years, poverty can also be very invisible. You can be holding a job, you can be educated, you can have a roof over your head. But life is very tough because the pay that you get, the income that you get, is not able to get you past basic necessities or even have security for tomorrow. So I think what we realize about poverty can be more discussed, in a much deeper way. And I think for people to have that understanding would definitely help the world steer in a more compassionate direction.
I'm so sorry, we're going to have to leave it there. Fascinating stuff. Chow and Lin, thank you so much for speaking to us here on France 24. And you can catch that exhibition at the Rencontres d'Arles photography exhibition in the city of Arles from the 4th of July.